Hey everybody, this is my 1991 Chevy K3500 4x4 454 7.4 liter fuel injected motor. I bought the truck over the summer. It's got about 140,000 miles on it and it's in pretty clean shape. I knew the previous owner and I knew he was a pretty detail oriented person. And he just didn't need it anymore. So I bought it to tow my boat with, about a 8,000 pound boat. So it's a pretty good load for this truck. And bringing the boat home, I wasn't real thrilled with the performance of the motor and just the power up hills. It's not a high performance motor by any means. I understand that, but I did feel it should do better. So I'm not one to normally throw parts at a vehicle, but in this case I did order a box load of parts and started replacing sensors and components and certain general tune-up parts. And that obviously led to some additional issues which I found as I worked on the motor. So looking at the list of parts, you can see it was pretty detailed. Fuel injection connectors, fuel injection components, a number of different sensors and valves and so forth, distributors, cap, distributor rotor, coils, wires, PCV, a repair manual. I did order that just to have some reference, which was this repair manual. It's not 100% accurate or great, but it does help in some situations. So for what it's worth. And fuel, or let's see, fuel injection, pressure regulator, gasket for the valve covers, seal kits for the fuel injectors, fuel filters, ignition control module, thermostats, spark plugs, shock absorbers, which I have not put on yet. That's another project for another day. And thermostat and thermostat seal, air intake sensor as well. So quite a list of parts that I purchased, and really with the goal of just getting things maybe running a little smoother and kind of knowing where I was at with sensors and what's been replaced and what hasn't. The vehicle was leaking fluids from the front end for a long time, and that's water on the floor, not fluid now, but it was leaking fluid. I knew that. It was kind of on the underside of the engine and the shields under the motor. And what I found out is that there's an aftermarket transmission oil cooler attached to the front of the radiator, which was leaking. The connections were loose. The whole installation is kind of makeshift in my opinion, but I didn't want to get into totally plumbing that. So I went back with the same approach they had, which is just disconnected line that usually goes to the radiator, and it's rerouted with these hoses that goes down to the oil cooler, back up, and feeds back through the radiator and then ultimately back to the transmission. So yes, I do like zip ties for certain things. For that application, I felt comfortable going back with the way it was. It's been that way a long time, and I didn't want to get too involved in replumbing that. But that was one of the surprises that came along, was the leaks there. And fortunately, it was just bad hose clamps and age. So I reconnected that, and I was happy with that. Made up some brackets for it to mount it, because previously it was actually fastened through the other radiator with these little plastic clips, which didn't seem to hold up too well. But on the motor itself, I think one of the more important things I did was get into the fuel injection system. And these motors, as I say, are not high performance. Everything I read suggests they're kind of a dog of a motor, all things considered. But I didn't want to get into totally modifying it. I just wanted to keep it stock. So I did put in some new fuel injectors. I put a new diaphragm in, new gaskets. I put on new clips, because the old ones, as soon as you looked at them, they cracked. These plastic pieces got very brittle over the years, and the wires on the old units were damaged. And apparently that's a pretty common issue. When people put their air cleaner back on, they pinch the wires or catch the wires and pinch them here. So I did rewire that, and I put all the wires back into some protectors, some shields. All this was all brittle and broken off, and I got probably 90% of it done. There are a couple areas down low here, for instance, which I haven't gotten to as far as finishing yet, but I felt it was good to get everything back and protected and shielded to some degree, and some connections here, for instance. So that definitely seems to have made a difference. One thing that was evident was the gasket under that was all deteriorated and actually seemed like it was missing in sections, and one port may have been bleeding into the other. Whether it really matters, I don't know, but I did get into replacing all those gaskets and going through the fuel injection system and rebuilding that, which was pretty straightforward. The diaphragm does have a pretty powerful spring in it, so do be careful if you take that apart. That spring can take your eye out, so be sure to contain that when you dismantle that diaphragm assembly that's back up in there. It's in that little float type component there. I put a lot of new vacuum connections in. All the vacuum lines were loose and seemed to be potentially losing vacuum. So that's tight now. A new valve here, PVC, no, PVC's pipe, PCV, positive crankcase ventilation, I believe. So I put a new valve in there. That's better. It's tighter now. New spark plugs and new spark plug wires. The old spark plugs and wires didn't seem that bad, but in trying to get the old wires off, I damaged one of the boots. These are newer, but one of the boots got damaged when I was trying to pull these off. So I put them back on, and I put in some what is it? It's a grease that you put on the boot of the spark plug, not on the spark plug, not on the spark plug connections, but just on the boot to prevent them from adhering to the spark plug ceramic. Again, stress, don't put it on the metal connectors, as it will cause a disconnect for all intents and purposes. Kind of rerouted the wires a little more cleanly, cleaned up the valve covers, put the new valve covers on. In order to get the valve cover gaskets on, I'm sorry, in order to get the valve covers off, I did have to loosen up some brackets and kind of move things out of the way, just in order to get the covers off of there. It's kind of tight. So that was a little bit of a project, and some knuckle busters there. Put in some new temperature sensors for the computer here, as well as, again, a new thermostat. I had been advised to put in a 165 degree thermostat, which is significantly lower than what was in there. It had a 195 in it. I put a 180 thermostat in there, just kind of as a happy medium, to see if it runs a little better or cooler. I thought 165 was too low, but I may be wrong, so I can change that in the future if it seems to be a problem. In doing the thermostat, obviously some new antifreeze. I felt the hoses were really kind of soft in some areas and brittle in other areas, so I put in a new upper and lower hose assembly, which is always fun, and a lot of new clamps for the radiator assemblies. Ground wires that were not disconnected, but they had been melded at some point, so I reconnected and shrink wrapped those a little bit better and cleaned up their connections as well. In going to put the rotor and distributor cap on, I noticed the distributor that was in the vehicle was in really bad shape. There was a pile of rust below the rotor inside the distributor, which led me to ultimately purchase a new distributor. Didn't want to, but I kind of had to. The old distributor, it was so corroded. You can see that the components in there are contacting one another, almost grinding against one another. I was actually surprised that the vehicle, after seeing that, even ran. I don't know if you can hear this. Let me see. But it's a lot of contact there and a really rough operation. So I was happy to put in a new distributor. That led to resetting the timing. I didn't take the time to really mark the timing and distributor, so I had to go through and set up top dead center. So number one spark plug, find top dead center. That is when you have a bar on the engine and are turning the engine by hand, or if you had someone actually here to crank the engine for you, feeling pressure or air dispel from that cylinder when the spark plug's out. So finding top dead center on that cylinder, setting the distributor in, and getting the timing set, which took a little bit of doing. I came to learn that you have to disconnect, or you should disconnect, and I just have this loose here, but you have to disconnect a computer connection, which is in this truck is back in here. There's a little clip back in there that pops apart. Disconnecting that, then setting the timing, and then reconnecting that, and then the computer kind of takes over control of the timing. And once I got that set, it definitely seemed to, timing wise, seemed to run well. So I was happy with that. This truck has a Banks, an aftermarket air cleaner on it, just so you're aware. I don't know if it really helps or not, but that's what's on the fuel injection system. It looks like the base is stock, but the cover's different and maybe a little bigger filter. And again, be careful with placing that air cleaner back on, because these wires can get caught in there. And I definitely think that was part of the problem with the fuel injection system, maybe not working as well as it should. Trying to think of anything else that was exciting during the process. Nothing that I can think of. I'm going to go ahead and start it up, and we can maybe see. You're going to love the interior of this truck. If that doesn't scream 1991 or what, I don't know. Beautiful dash, nice and cracked. But anyhow, go ahead and start it up. Starts right up. I have good oil pressure. The temperature, I was just out for a drive earlier, the temperature is coming up. That's good to see. And truck does have a tachometer in it, which was not my doing, but it's there. It's nice. Bit of a whistling noise. Not quite sure what that is. Doesn't seem to do it when the air cleaner's on, so I'm not terribly worried about it. I'm going to shut it off because I'm in a closed up garage here and I don't want to asphyxiate myself. That's pretty much it. Again, fun project. I'm not a master mechanic, obviously. But for the most part, the project went pretty smooth. There were definitely some challenges along the way, and as always, there's some extra parts you need to go buy that you didn't expect, and there's still a few things I need to address. But I'm hoping that I'll have better throttle response, power, and fewer leaks of oil and transmission fluid, and a good reliable couple years out of this motor. So that's pretty much it. Hope, trying to give a video back, as I've watched so many videos trying to figure out how to do this stuff. Some are good and some are bad. This is probably one of the bad videos you're going to watch. But anyhow, hope you've enjoyed it. Looking at the truck. Again, 1991 K3500 with a 454, which I believe has the peanut port heads, which are a type of head on this vehicle that's not the most desirable, and I think it's part of the reason I just don't have a lot of power. But it runs like a champ now, so I'm going to keep driving it and try to keep it as reliable as I can. Thanks for watching.